Have you ever experienced true love? How much would you sacrifice for it? Let's find out. Love Beyond Wealth, Part 1. Amara stretched her arms, waking up to the soft rays of the morning sun streaming through the tall, elegant windows of her room. She lay in her massive, luxurious bed surrounded by silk, sheets and pillows that were far too many for one person. As she looked around the room, she saw expensive paintings hanging on the walls, rare sculptures placed thoughtfully on stands, and the finest furnishings any person could dream of. Yet despite the beauty and wealth that surrounded her, Amara felt an emptiness inside her heart that nothing could fill. Amara's father, Giovanni, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in Italy. He had worked hard his entire life to build a vast empire that included everything from fashion brands to real estate. Because of this, Amara never had to worry about money. She attended the best schools, wore the finest clothes, and traveled to the most beautiful places. But as the years went by, Amara began to feel like her life was missing something essential. Every day felt the same. She would wake up to the sound of her housemates preparing breakfast in the grand dining hall downstairs. After breakfast, she would attend social events, go shopping in high-end boutiques, or attend business dinners with her father. The people she met were always polite and well-dressed, but Amara found their conversations dull and predictable. They always talked about money, luxury, and status, things that no longer excited her. Amara's heart longed for something real, something deeper than the glittering world she was trapped in. She often thought about love, wondering what it would feel like to be a family as rich and powerful as theirs, with someone who truly understood her, someone who loved her for who she was, not because of her wealth or family name. But her father, Giovanni, had other plans for her. He expected her to marry someone who came from someone who could bring more wealth and status to their empire. One morning, as she walked through the grand hallway of their villa, she overheard her father speaking on the phone. His deep, authoritative voice echoed off the marble floors as he discussed a possible business merger with another wealthy family. Amara's heart sank as she realized that this merger likely involved her. Her father had been hinting for months about a possible marriage to the son of one of his business partners. Amara wanted to scream, but she knew it would do no good. Giovanni had always been a strict and controlling father, and though he loved her, he didn't understand her. He believed that providing her with wealth and luxury was enough. But Amara needed more. She needed love, passion, and a sense of purpose in her life. That afternoon, Amara decided to take a walk to clear her mind. She left the villa and wandered through the streets of Rome, avoiding the usual high-end shops and cafes she frequented. Instead, she ventured into a bustling, lively market full of ordinary people selling fresh produce, handmade crafts, and street food. The air was filled with the sound of chatter, laughter, and music. It was there, in the heart of the market, that Amara heard the most beautiful melody. It was coming from a young man playing the violin, standing on a small wooden platform. His music was different from anything she had ever heard before, raw, soulful, and filled with emotion. She stopped in her tracks, unable to move, as she listened to the notes fill the air. The young man had dark, curly hair that fell over his forehead as he played, his eyes closed as if he were lost in the music. His clothes were simple, almost shabby, but his talent was undeniable. Amara watched in awe as he played with such passion, completely unaware of the world around him. When the song ended, the small crowd that had gathered around him clapped, and he opened his eyes, smiling warmly at the people. Amara felt her heart skip a beat. There was something about him that drew her in, something she couldn't explain. She stayed there for the rest of the afternoon, listening to him play. When he finally packed up his violin and began to leave, Amara felt a strange sense of loss, as if she were losing something important. Without thinking, she followed him through the market, keeping a safe distance so he wouldn't notice her. The young man walked to the edge of the market where a small, run-down house stood. He unlocked the door and disappeared. Inside, leaving Amara standing outside, her mind racing. She didn't know why, but she felt a deep connection to this man, a connection she had never felt with anyone before. Inside the small, dimly lit house, Luca carefully placed his violin on the worn table, sighing with relief. His fingers were sore from playing all day, but he didn't mind. Music was his passion, his escape from the hardships of life. Luca lived with his elderly mother, Maria, in this modest house. They had very little, but they made do with what they had. Luca had been playing the violin in the market for as long as he could. Remember, using the money he earned to buy food and medicine for his mother, who had been sick for many years. Life had not been easy for them, but Luca never complained. He loved his mother dearly and would do anything to care for her. Maria, despite her illness, always had a smile on her face. She was proud of Luca and his talent, even though it didn't bring in much money. She often told him that his music was a gift, something special that touched people's hearts, even if it didn't fill their pockets. "Luca," Maria called from her bed in the corner of the room. "How was the market today?" Luca smiled as he walked over to her. "It was good, Mama. A lot of people stopped to listen today. I even saw a young woman standing there for hours just listening. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she liked the music." Maria chuckled softly. "Perhaps she was enchanted by your music. You know, Luca, your music has the power to reach people in ways words cannot." Luca nodded, though he didn't think much of it. To him, music was just a way to survive, a way to keep going despite the difficulties they faced. But deep down, he knew his mother was right. Music had always been his way of expressing himself, of pouring out the emotions he couldn't put into words. As Luca prepared dinner, his thoughts kept drifting back to the young woman he had seen at the market. There was something about her that stood out from the crowd, something different. He couldn't explain it, but he had felt her presence, even though she hadn't said a word. Amara couldn't get the young violinist out of her mind. She had always been surrounded by people who wore fine clothes, drove expensive cars, and measured their worth by the size of their bank accounts. But this man, with his simple clothes and warm smile, was different. He seemed content in a way that none of the wealthy people she knew ever were. It intrigued her, filled her with curiosity. The next day, Amara found herself drawn back to the market. She wandered through the colorful stalls, pretending to browse, but her mind was focused on finding him. Finally, she spotted him again, playing in the same spot as before. Once again, his music filled the air, captivating everyone who passed by. This time, she decided to stay closer. She sat on a bench nearby, watching him play. She noticed the way he closed his eyes as he played, completely absorbed in the music. He didn't seem to care about the people around him or how much money he might earn. That day, his only focus was the violin and the melody it produced. Amara stayed for hours, lost in the beauty of the music. When he finished, she felt a sudden urge to approach him, to speak to him. But her heart raced with nervousness. She had never spoken to someone like him before. What would she even say? Just as she gathered the courage to walk over, Luca packed up his violin and began to leave. Disappointed but determined, Amara promised herself she would return again the next day. The following day, Amara returned to the market, eager to see Luca again. This time when he finished playing, she didn't hesitate. As he was packing his violin into its worn-out case, she walked up to him. "Excuse me," she said softly, her heart pounding. Luca looked up, surprised to see her standing there. Up close, he noticed how graceful and elegant she looked, her clothes much finer than anything he had ever seen. She seemed out of place in the busy market, yet there was a warmth in her eyes that made him feel at ease. "Yes," Luca replied, smiling kindly. I've been listening to your music for the past few days," Amara said, trying to steady her voice. "It's beautiful. I've never heard anything like it." Luca's smile widened. "Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Music is everything to me." "I can tell," Amara said, her voice more confident now. "It's like you become part of the music when you play. It's amazing." Luca chuckled softly. "That's the magic of it, I suppose. It's my way of expressing things I can't say with words." They talked for a while longer, standing there in the middle of the market with the hustle and bustle of people passing by. Amara learned that Luca played to support his mother, and that he had never had formal music lessons. Everything he knew, he had learned by listening to others and practicing on his own. Amara was fascinated by Luca's story. She had always been surrounded by people who had access to the best education, the best teachers, and the best opportunities. Yet here was a man who had created something beautiful out of nothing. As they spoke, Amara felt a connection growing between them. Luca was kind and humble, qualities she rarely found in the people. She knew there was no pretense, no hidden agenda, just honesty and warmth. After that day, Amara visited the market almost every afternoon, always finding time to listen to Luca's music. Slowly, their brief conversations turned into longer talks. They would sit on a bench by the fountain after Luca finished playing, discussing everything, from music to their dreams and aspirations. Luca found himself looking forward to Amara's visits. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Her curiosity about his music, her genuine interest in his life. He couldn't quite understand why someone like her, clearly wealthy and from a different world, would spend so much time talking to him, but he appreciated her company. As the days passed, Amara and Luca grew closer. They laughed together, shared their thoughts and feelings, and talked about their very different worlds. Luca, who had always been reserved, found it easy to open up to Amara. She listened to him without judgment. And for the first time in a long while, Luca felt truly understood. Amara, too, felt something shifting inside her. Her life, which had always felt so empty, now had meaning. She looked forward to her afternoons in the market with Luca more than any fancy party or shopping trip. His simplicity, his kindness, it was everything she had been searching for. But as their friendship deepened, Amara began to realize that she was falling in love with Luca. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, and it both excited and frightened her. She knew that her father would never approve. He had always wanted her to marry someone rich and powerful, someone who could add to their family's wealth. Luca, with his worn violin and modest life, was the complete opposite of what her father expected. Amara tried to keep her feelings for Luca hidden, but it became more difficult each day. She wanted to tell him how she felt, but fear held her back. What if he didn't feel the same way? What if her father found out and forbade her from seeing Luca ever again. Meanwhile, Luca's feelings for Amara were growing as well. He had never imagined that someone like her could be interested in a man like him, but the more time they spent together, the more he realized how much he cared for her. He often found himself daydreaming about what it would be like to be with her, but he always pushed those thoughts aside, believing it was impossible. One evening, as they sat by the fountain after another long conversation, Luca turned to Amara and said, "You know, you've changed my life." Amara smiled, surprised by his words. "How so?" Luca looked down at his hands, trying to find the right words. "Before I met you, I was just surviving, playing my music, taking care of my mother. But since you started coming here, everything feels different. I feel happier, more alive." Amara's heart swelled with emotion. She wanted to tell him that she felt the same, that he had changed her life too. But before she could speak, Luca continued, "I know we come from different worlds, and I don't know what you think of me, but I've fallen in love with you, Amara." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Amara's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she didn't know what to say. She had hoped for this, but hearing it out loud made her realize how complicated their situation was. "I love you too, Luca," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I don't know how this could ever work." Luca looked at her with a mixture of hope and sadness. "Why not?" Amara sighed, glancing down at her lap. "My father would never allow it. He expects me to marry someone from a wealthy family, to sell someone who can help his business. He doesn't care about love, only status." Luca's heart sank. He had feared this might be the case, but hearing it confirmed was still painful. "So, what do we do?" "I don't know," Amara said, her voice trembling. "But I don't want to lose you." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their love and the obstacles they faced pressing down on them. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they were certain of one thing. They couldn't bear to be apart. The days that followed were a mix of joy and anxiety for Amara. She continued to visit Luca at the market, and they spent more time together, knowing their love had finally been expressed. Yet every moment with Luca felt bittersweet, as the shadow of her father's expectations loomed over them. Amara knew it was only a matter of time before Giovanni found out about their relationship, and she dreaded the inevitable confrontation. One evening, as Amara returned home from the market, she found her father waiting for her in the grand living room. His face was stern, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. Her heart sank as she realized what was coming. "Amara," Giovanni began, his voice cold, "I have heard some news." Part 1 ends here. What might be the news Giovanni heard? What would happen to Amara and Luca if the news Giovanni heard was about their relationship? To find out, click the video here or follow the link in the description.